Arthur Almeida, a ruthless CEO, had everything money could buy but felt nothing inside, until a chance encounter with a homeless woman wearing his late mother's buried necklace. What secrets did she hold, and how would they rewrite his life? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Arthur Almeida stared at the pile of papers on his desk. Another late night at Almeida Enterprises, just like every other night. The lights of New York City sparkled through his office window on the 40th floor, but he barely noticed them anymore. At 45 years old, he had everything money could buy, but something was always missing. "Mr. Almeida, your car is ready." His assistant Jenny called through the intercom. "Thank you, Jenny, you can go home now," Arthur replied, gathering his things. He looked at his reflection in the window. His dark hair was starting to show traces of gray and the wrinkles around. His eyes were getting deeper. His mother used to say that wrinkles were signs of a life well lived, but Arthur wondered if his were just from stress. The elevator ride down was quiet, just how he liked it. The lobby was empty, except for the night security guard, who nodded. As Arthur walked past, outside his driver held the door of the black Mercedes open. "Home, Mr. Almeida?" "Yes, James," the usual route. The car pulled away from the curb and Arthur closed his eyes. He was tired, so tired. The board meeting earlier had been brutal. Another company they were planning to take over, more jobs that would be cut, more families that would struggle. His mother would have hated it. The car stopped at a red light on Fifth Avenue. Arthur opened his eyes and looked out the window. That's when he saw her. An old woman sat on the sidewalk, a cardboard sign in her trembling hands. Her clothes were worn but clean, and her gray hair was neatly tied back. Something about her seemed different from the other homeless people he usually ignored. Maybe it was the way she held herself, with a kind of dignity that caught his attention. Then he saw it around her neck. "Stop the car!" Arthur's voice was sharp, urgent. "Sir?" James looked confused. "Pull over. Now." The moment the car stopped, Arthur jumped out, ignoring James's concerned calls. His expensive Italian shoes clicked against the pavement as he approached the woman. People walking by gave him strange looks. A man in a $3,000 suit rushing toward a homeless person wasn't something you saw every day. The woman looked up and Arthur's breath caught in his throat. Around her neck was a necklace he would recognize anywhere. A golden pendant with a unique design of intertwining branches surrounding a small sapphire. He had helped pick it out when he was 10 years old, spending his entire savings of $47 to contribute to its purchase. It was his mother's favorite piece of jewelry, the one they had buried her with 15 years ago. "Excuse me," Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. "That necklace." The old woman's hand went to the pendant, touching it protectively. Her eyes, a striking shade of brown, met his. "Do you like it? An angel gave it to me many years ago." Arthur felt dizzy. This wasn't possible. He had watched them close his mother's casket with that necklace around her neck. He had visited her grave every month for 15 years. "Ma'am, where did you get that necklace? Please, it's very important." The woman, who must have been in her 70s, studied his face. "You look familiar," she said slowly. "Like someone I knew once. Someone kind." James had gotten out of the car and was standing nearby, ready to intervene if needed. But Arthur barely noticed him. All he could see was the necklace, the one his mother had promised would stay with her forever. "My name is Arthur Almeida," he said, kneeling down despite his expensive suit. "And that necklace belonged to my mother." The woman's eyes widened. "Almeida?" Her hand trembled as she touched the pendant again. "Helena Almeida." Arthur felt his world tilt. "You knew my mother." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, my boy. Your mother. She was my angel." A group of people walked past them, some muttering about the strange scene, a CEO kneeling on the sidewalk talking to a homeless woman. But Arthur couldn't care less. His heart was pounding. "Please," he said softly, "tell me how you got this necklace." "It was buried with my mother, I know it was." The woman, who introduced herself as Rosa Martinez, or Donna Rosa as she preferred to be called, looked at the growing crowd around them. "This is not the place," she said with unexpected authority in her voice. Some stories need to be told properly. Arthur stood up, made a decision. Let me take you somewhere we can talk. Please, I need to understand. Donna Rosa looked at him for a long moment, then at the necklace. Your mother told me once that whoever had this necklace would always be welcome in her family. She gathered her few belongings, a worn backpack and a plastic bag. I think it's time I told you about Helena Almeida and the secret life you're for. Mother led that you never knew about. As Arthur helped Donna Rosa into his car, ignoring the stares from passers-by, he felt like he was standing on the edge of something huge. The necklace that should have been buried with his mother was now around the neck of this homeless woman who spoke about his mother like she knew her well. James, take us to my apartment, Arthur instructed his driver, who looked uncertain but nodded. Sitting in the leather seats of the Mercedes, Donna Rosa looked out of place but not uncomfortable. She held herself with a dignity that seemed at odds with her circumstances. The necklace caught the streetlights, twinkling like it used to when his mother wore it. Your mother, Donna Rosa said softly as they drove through the city. She saved my life and many others, but that's just the beginning of the story. Arthur looked at the woman who wore his mother's necklace, the necklace that should have been deep underground in Mount Hope Cemetery. He had a feeling his life was about to change forever. The car turned onto Park Avenue, heading toward Arthur's penthouse apartment. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with messages about tomorrow's meetings, deals to be closed, money to be made. For the first time in 15 years, none of it seemed important. All that mattered was the story this woman had to tell about his mother and how her necklace had made its way from a grave to the neck of a homeless woman on Fifth Avenue. The elevator. Ride to Arthur's penthouse was silent. Donna Rosa stood quietly beside him, her worn shoes a stark contrast to the polished marble floor. When the doors opened directly into his apartment, she didn't seem impressed by the luxury around her. Her eyes were fixed on the large family portrait hanging in the entrance hall. That's her, Donna Rosa whispered, walking toward the painting. Helena. She was wearing this same necklace when I first met her. Arthur stared at the portrait of his mother. He had commissioned it just before she got sick. She was sitting in their garden wearing a blue dress and that special necklace, her smile as warm as he remembered. Please sit down, Arthur gestured to the living room. Would you like some tea, coffee? Tea would be nice, Donna Rosa said, carefully sitting on the edge of an expensive leather couch. She looked around the room, her eyes stopping on more family. Photos scattered around. Arthur went to the kitchen, his hands shaking slightly as he prepared the tea. Through the doorway, he could see Donna Rosa touching the necklace again, lost in thought. When he returned with 2 cups, she accepted hers with surprisingly steady hands. Now, Arthur said, sitting across from her, please tell me about my mother. How did you get that necklace? Donna Rosa took a sip of tea before speaking. It was 20 years ago I was pregnant, living on the streets near St. Patrick's Cathedral. Your mother? She used to come there every Wednesday, Arthur frowned. Wednesday, but that's impossible. She had board meetings every Wednesday morning. No, dear boy. She would skip those meetings. She told everyone she was at the board meeting, but instead, she would come to help at the homeless shelter behind the church. Arthur felt like he'd been punched in the gut. His mother lying about business meetings. It didn't make sense. Helena Almeida had been the CEO of their company, completely dedicated to the business, or so he had thought. Every Wednesday, Donna Rosa continued. She would serve food, help with paperwork, listen to people's stories, but more than that, she gave people hope. She looked at us like we were human beings, not problems to be solved. But why didn't she tell anyone? Arthur's voice cracked slightly. She said, some kinds of kindness need to be kept secret, that helping others isn't about getting credit. Donna Rosa's eyes filled with tears. I was 7 months pregnant when I met her. My husband had died. I had lost my job, my home. I was ready to give up. Arthur watched as she touched the necklace again, her fingers tracing the familiar pattern. Your mother sat with me for hours that first day. She didn't try to fix everything. She just listened. Then she started bringing me prenatal vitamins, making sure I ate properly, helping me find medical care. She visited me in the hospital when my Maria was born. Maria? Arthur leaned forward. You had a daughter. Donna Rosa's face changed, pain flooding her features. Yes, my beautiful Maria. She died when she was 5. Leukemia. Your mother was there through all of it, supporting us, helping with medical bills. The day Maria died, your mother gave me this necklace. Arthur remembered that time now. His mother had been distracted, emotional. She had told them she was dealing with a difficult business situation. Another lie, he realized. She took it off. Her own neck, Donna Rosa continued, and put it around mine. She said, Rosa, this necklace belongs to my family, and you are family now. Whenever you wear it, remember that you're not alone. Arthur stood up abruptly, walking to the window. His mother had never told him any of this. Why? He had always thought he knew her so well. But, he turned back to Donna Rosa, we buried her with that necklace. I remember clearly. How? She asked me to return it when she got sick, Donna Rosa explained. She said her son, you, had helped pick it out, that it should be with her in the end. But the night before the funeral, she appeared in my dreams. She told me to take it back, that I would need it more than she would. You took it from her casket? Arthur's voice was barely a whisper. The funeral home security guard was someone. Your mother had helped years before. When I told him what she had said in my dream, he let me in. I know it sounds crazy, but it felt right. Like she had planned it somehow. Arthur sat down heavily. His head was spinning. The mother he thought he knew so well had led a whole other life he knew nothing about. She had skipped board meetings to serve food to the homeless. She had helped raise a little girl he never knew existed. She had given away her precious necklace to a stranger who became family. After Maria died, Donna Rosa said softly, I lost my way again. The grief was too much. I couldn't keep a job, couldn't stay in one place, but I never sold this necklace, even in my darkest times. It was my connection to the 2 angels in my life, your mother and my Maria. Arthur looked at the woman sitting in his expensive apartment. She was homeless, yet she spoke with more dignity than many of his wealthy business associates. She had nothing, yet she had kept his mother's necklace safe all these years. There's more, she said, her voice growing stronger. Your mother didn't just help me. There were others, many others. She created a whole network of people helping. People. Some of them are still out there, still doing her work. What do you mean? Every person she helped was asked to help someone else when they could. Some of them got back on their feet, became successful. They never forgot her kindness. There's a lawyer downtown who was once homeless. Your mother helped him get back to law school. There's a nurse at Mount Sinai who was a teenage runaway. A restaurant owner who used to dig through dumpsters for food. All of them help others now, in her memory. Arthur felt tears running down his face. He didn't bother wiping them away. Why are you telling me this now? Donna Rosa stood up, walked over to him and took his hand. Her skin was rough but warm. Because it's time you knew who your mother really was. And because... She hesitated. Because I'm dying, Arthur. Cancer. The doctors at the free clinic gave me 6 months. That's why I've been sitting on that street corner. I hoped you would pass by eventually. This necklace needs to find its way home. Arthur stared at her. This woman who had been like a second daughter to his mother, who had kept her secrets all these years. Another person he was about to lose before really knowing them. No, he said firmly. The necklace stays with you. You are family, remember? And family, his voice broke. Family takes care of each other. Outside his penthouse windows, New York City glittered in the night. But Arthur wasn't seeing the lights anymore. He was seeing his mother in a new way, not just as the successful businesswoman he had known, but as someone who had understood what really mattered in life. And now, looking at Donna Rosa, he realized he had a chance to understand too. Tell me more, he whispered. Tell me everything about my mother, and about Maria, and about all the others she helped. I need to know. Donna Rosa smiled, touching the necklace one more time. It's a long story, my boy. A story about love and hope and the kind of wealth that can't be measured in dollars. Are you ready to hear it? Arthur nodded, finally understanding that his life would never be the same after tonight. And somehow he knew his mother had planned it this way all along. The next morning, Arthur called his office for the first time in 15 years to say he wouldn't be coming in. Jenny, his assistant, almost dropped the phone in shock. "Are you sick, Mr. Almeida?" she asked, concern in her voice. "No, Jenny. I just have something important to take care of. Cancel all my meetings for the next few days." After hanging up, Arthur looked at Donna Rosa, who had spent the night in his guest room. She was sitting at his kitchen counter, wearing the same clothes but looking more rested. The morning sun made the necklace sparkle around her neck. "First," Arthur said, pouring them both coffee, "we're going shopping. You need some new clothes." "Arthur, I don't want your charity," Donna Rosa started to protest. "It's not charity, it's family taking care of family, remember?" He smiled, using her own words. "And then I want you to show me all the places my mother used to go, all the people she helped. I need to understand everything." Donna Rosa looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Your mother would be proud of you right now." Their first stop was a department store, where Arthur insisted on buying Donna Rosa several comfortable outfits. She chose simple, practical clothes, refusing anything too expensive. The saleswoman looked at them strangely, the well-dressed businessman, and the elderly woman who was obviously homeless. But Arthur's platinum credit card kept her quiet. "Now," Arthur said as they got back into his car, "where do we start?" "St. Patrick's," Donna Rosa said firmly. "The shelter is still there. Some of the same people your mother knew still volunteer." The shelter behind St. Patrick's Cathedral looked smaller than Arthur expected. A simple brick building with a worn sign reading Hope Harbor Shelter. Inside, the smell of coffee and cooking food filled the air. Several people were setting up tables for lunch. "Rosa," an elderly man with white hair, called out when they walked in. "We've been worried about you. You haven't been here in weeks and—" He stopped when he saw Arthur, his eyes going wide. "My God, you look just like Helena." "Father Michael, Donna," Rosa said warmly. "This is Arthur Almeida, Helena's son." The priest crossed himself, staring at Arthur. "Helena's boy. She talked about you all the time." He turned to the kitchen and called out, "Maria! Carmen, come quick! Helena's son is here." Two women rushed out from the kitchen. One was in her 60s wearing an apron, and the other was younger, maybe in her 40s. Both stopped dead when they saw Arthur. "Just like his mother," the older woman whispered. "Same eyes." Arthur felt overwhelmed. These people had known his mother, had worked with her while he had been completely unaware. "Please," he said, "tell me about her, about what she did here." They sat at one of the tables while Father Michael brought coffee. The older woman, Carmen, had been cooking at the shelter for 30 years. The younger one, Maria, not to be confused with Donna Rosa's daughter, had been a teenage runaway when Helena found her. "Your mother," Carmen said, her voice thick with emotion. "She didn't just bring food or money, she brought hope. She would sit with people, learn their stories, figure out what they really needed to get back on their feet." "She helped me get my GED," Maria added. "Paid for my nursing school. Now I work at Mount Sinai and I come here every weekend to help others." Father Michael nodded. "Helena started what we called the hope chain. Everyone she helped had to promise to help someone else when they could. Not with money necessarily, but with time, skills, whatever they could offer." "The lawyer," Donna Rosa said suddenly. "Arthur should meet Thomas." They drove downtown to a small law office. The sign on the door read, "Thomas Martinez, attorney at law." Inside, a well-dressed black man in his 50s looked up from his desk. When he saw Donna Rosa, he smiled broadly. "Rosa, it's been too long." Then he saw Arthur, and the smile faded into shock. "You must be Helena's son." "Everyone keeps recognizing me," Arthur said, shaking the lawyer's hand. "Your mother saved my life," Thomas said simply. "I was living on the streets, addicted to drugs, had lost my law license. She found me behind this very building, eating from a dumpster. Instead of just giving me food, she asked me what had happened, really listened." Thomas walked to a frame on his wall pointing to a law degree. "She helped me get clean, paid for my rehab, supported me through the process of getting my license back, made me promise to use my skills to help others." He turned back to Arthur. "Half my practice is pro bono work now, helping people who can't afford legal help, just like she wanted." Throughout the day, they visited more people: a restaurant owner who had been a homeless veteran, a teacher who had been a domestic abuse survivor, a small business owner who had been an undocumented immigrant. All of them had been helped by Helena Almeida, and all of them were now helping others. By evening, Arthur's head was spinning. They sat in a small diner, one owned by someone else his mother had helped, and he tried to process everything he'd learned. "How did she do all this?" he asked Donna Rosa. "Run the company, take care of our family, and still have time for all these people?" She used to say that time is like money. You can always find more of it if something is important. "Enough!" Donna Rosa sipped her coffee. "But there's something else you need to know, Arthur, something about the company." Arthur tensed. "What about it?" "Your mother had a plan. She was setting up a foundation, secretly transferring company funds into it. She wanted to turn part of Almeida Enterprises into a non-profit organization dedicated to helping people get back on their feet, but she got sick before she could finish it." Arthur felt like the wind had been knocked out of him. "A foundation? But there's nothing in the company records about this." "Because she kept it secret. She knew some board members would fight it. She was waiting for the right time." Donna Rosa reached into her new handbag and pulled out an envelope, worn and yellowed with age. "She gave this to me before she died. Said to give it to you when you were ready to understand." Arthur's hands shook as he took the envelope. Inside was a letter in his mother's handwriting and several documents. Plans for the Helena Almeida Foundation, complete with financial projections and implementation strategies. "Why didn't you give this to me before?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Donna Rosa touched the necklace. "Because you weren't ready. You were so focused on running the company the way you thought she would want, chasing profits, expanding at any cost. But that wasn't your mother's dream at all." Arthur read through the documents, his vision blurring with tears. The foundation was designed to provide job training, housing assistance, medical care, and education for people trying to rebuild their lives. It would have changed thousands of lives. "The board will fight this," he said quietly. "Yes," Donna Rosa agreed. "Just like they would have fought it 15 years ago. The question is, are you ready to fight for it now?" Arthur looked at the letter in his hands, then at the necklace around Donna Rosa's neck. He thought about all the people he'd met today, about how his mother had changed their lives, about how they were continuing her work, keeping her real legacy alive while he had been focused on nothing but profit. "Donna Rosa," he said slowly, "I think it's time for Almeida Enterprises to remember what my mother really wanted it to be." She smiled, touching the necklace one last time. "Then let me tell you about her real vision for the company. It's quite a story." Outside the diner windows, the city was coming alive with evening lights. But Arthur wasn't thinking about board meetings or profit margins anymore. He was thinking about hope chains, about promises kept, and about the true meaning of his mother's legacy. The next morning, Arthur walked into Almeida Enterprises wearing the same suit as yesterday. For the first time in his career, he hadn't gone home to change. He'd spent the night reading and rereading his mother's letters and documents, making plans with Donna Rosa. "Mr. Almeida," Jenny jumped up from her desk looking worried. "The board members are very upset about the cancelled meetings. Mr. Richardson has called 3 times already." "Good," Arthur said, surprising her. "Call an emergency board. Meeting for 10 o'clock. Everyone must attend. But sir, some of them are out of town. Then they can join by video. This can't wait." He paused at his office door. "And Jenny, could you please help someone get settled in the guest office? She'll be arriving in about an hour." "Of course, sir. Who should I expect?" "Her name is Rosa Martinez. Treat her like you would treat my mother." Inside his office, Arthur spread out his mother's documents on his desk. The plan she had created was brilliant in its simplicity. 20% of the company's profits would go to the foundation. The foundation would partner with existing organizations like Hope Harbor Shelter to create a network of support for people trying to rebuild their lives. His phone buzzed. "Sir?" Jenny's voice came through. "Mr. Richardson is here. He's quite insistent on speaking with you before the board meeting." Arthur took a deep breath. "Send him in." George Richardson was in his 70s, with cold grey eyes and an expensive suit. He'd been on the board since before Arthur was born. When he walked in, his face was red with anger. "Have you lost your mind?" Richardson demanded. Canceling the Maya deal meeting, the Tokyo conference call. Do you know how much money we could lose? Sit down, George, Arthur said calmly. We need to talk about my mother. Richardson's face changed. Helena, what about her? Did you know about her Wednesday activities? What are you talking about? The board meetings she skipped, the ones where she was actually serving food at a homeless shelter. Richardson's face went pale. That was a long time ago, a foolish waste of time that we chose to overlook because she was otherwise an excellent CEO. Arthur's hands tightened into fists. A waste of time? Helping people rebuild their lives was a waste of time? Business is business, Arthur. Your mother understood that, despite her charitable inclinations. That's why she never went through with that ridiculous foundation idea. Arthur froze. You knew about the foundation? Richardson's expression gave him away before he could deny it. It was a stupid plan. It would have destroyed shareholder value. When she got sick, we made sure those documents disappeared. It was for the best. You stole my mother's legacy, Arthur said quietly. You hid her true vision for this company. We protected this company. Richardson stood up, looming over the desk. Look at our stock price, our global expansion. That's the real legacy. A knock at the door interrupted them. Jenny poked her head in. Sir, Mrs. Martinez is here. Send her in, Arthur said, not taking his eyes off Richardson. Donna Rosa walked into the office wearing one of her new outfits. The golden necklace gleamed against her blouse. When Richardson saw her, his face went even paler. You, he whispered. You're supposed to be dead. Arthur looked between them, shocked. You know her? Of course he knows me, Donna Rosa said calmly. He's the one who tried to buy my silence 15 years ago. Offered me $50,000 to disappear and never tell you about your mother's plans. You refused, Richardson spat. But then you disappeared anyway. Because my daughter died, Donna Rosa said, her voice sharp. I lost myself in grief, but I never lost this. She touched the necklace. And I never lost Helena's trust. Arthur stood up slowly. Get out of my office, George. Wait for the board meeting, and if you try to warn the others. He held up his mother's document. These will go straight to the press. After Richardson left, Arthur turned to Donna Rosa. There's more, isn't there? More that you haven't told me? She nodded sadly. Your mother didn't just get sick, Arthur. She was getting ready to announce the foundation. Richardson and some others. On the board, they threatened her. Said they would reveal some manufactured scandals, destroy the company's reputation. The stress, the fighting, it made her existing condition worse. Arthur felt sick. They killed her. No, cancer killed her. But they stole her dream. And now, she smiled, touching the necklace. Now it's time to bring that dream back to life. The next 2 hours were a blur of activity. Jenny helped them set up presentations and documents. Arthur's personal lawyer arrived to review everything. And one by one, board members arrived for the emergency meeting. At exactly 10 o'clock, Arthur walked into the boardroom. Donna Rosa sat quietly in a corner, the necklace catching the light. Several board members were attending via video conference on the large screen on the wall. Thank you all for coming, Arthur began. Today we're going to talk about my mother's true legacy and about the future of Almeida Enterprises. What's going on, Arthur? Asked Sarah Chen, one of the newer board members. And who is that woman? This is Rosa Martinez. She's family. And she has my mother's necklace, the one that was supposed to be buried with her. The room erupted in confused murmurs. Richardson sat silently, his face like stone. 15 years ago, Arthur continued, some people in this room conspired to hide my mother's plans for this company. They threatened her, stressed her to the point of worsening her illness, and then buried her dreams with her. Or so they thought. He started distributing copies of his mother's documents. Today, we're going to vote on implementing the Helena Almeida Foundation. 20% of our profits will go to helping people rebuild their lives. We'll partner with existing organizations, create job training programs, provide housing assistance. This is ridiculous, Richardson stood up. We have a responsibility to our shareholders. Our biggest shareholders, Arthur's lawyer spoke, have already been consulted. They're very interested in the positive press and tax benefits this foundation would bring. I've spent the last 24 hours meeting people my mother helped, Arthur continued. People who are now doctors, lawyers, business owners, people who are helping others, creating a chain of hope that keeps growing. That's the kind of impact this foundation could have on a massive scale. Sarah Chen was reading through the documents, looking impressed. These projections, the tax benefits alone would offset much of the cost. And the positive PR. This isn't about PR, Arthur said firmly. This is about doing what's right, about creating real, lasting change in people's lives. You can't be serious, Richardson sputtered. This is business, not charity. No, Donna Rosa spoke up, her voice carrying across the room. This is Helena's vision. A business that makes profit while helping people profit. A company that measures success not just in dollars, but in lives changed. The next hour was intense. Questions were asked, documents were examined, lawyers consulted. Richardson and his allies fought hard, but they were outnumbered. Younger board members especially were drawn to the idea of corporate social responsibility. On this scale, finally, it came to a vote. The motion to establish the Helena Almeida Foundation and allocate 20% of company profits to its mission passes, Arthur announced, his voice thick with emotion. With a vote of 8-3, Richardson stormed out of the room, followed by his two allies. The other board members gathered around Arthur, asking questions, offering suggestions. Sarah Chen was already talking about partnership opportunities with other corporations, but Arthur was looking at Donna Rosa, who sat quietly crying in her corner. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, walking over to her. "Your mother," she whispered, touching the necklace. "She knew this day would come. That's why she made sure I kept this safe." The necklace wasn't just jewelry. It was a key to unlocking her real legacy. Arthur looked around the boardroom, now buzzing with excitement about the foundation's possibilities. "We did it," he said. "We really did it." "No," Donna Rosa smiled through her tears. "This is just the beginning. Now the real work starts." Outside the boardroom windows, the city stretched out before them. Somewhere out there, people were struggling, losing hope, needing help. But now, finally, Helena Almeida's dream of helping them was becoming reality. The necklace sparkled in the sunlight, its branches intertwining like the connections between all the lives Helena had touched, all the lives they would touch now, and Arthur knew that somewhere his mother was smiling. The news of the Helena Almeida Foundation spread quickly through the business world. By the next morning, Arthur's phone was ringing constantly with calls from reporters, other CEOs, and charitable organizations, but he had more pressing concerns on his mind. "The doctor can see you at 2 o'clock, he told Donna Rosa over breakfast in his apartment. She had moved into his guest room permanently, despite her initial protests. "Arthur, the free clinic is fine," she started to say. "No arguments," he cut her off gently. "Your family, and I want the best oncologists looking at your case." She touched the necklace, a gesture he'd noticed she made when she was emotional. "Your mother was just as stubborn." "Speaking of my mother," Arthur said carefully, "there's something that's been bothering me. Richardson knew who you were yesterday. He said you were supposed to be dead. What did he mean?" Donna Rosa's face darkened. "There's more to the story, much more. But you might not like what you hear. Tell me." She set down her coffee cup, her hands trembling slightly. "After your mother got sick, Richardson and his friends didn't just threaten to destroy the company's reputation. They threatened to destroy her legacy completely. They had fabricated documents showing she had embezzled money, the same money she had been secretly moving to start the foundation." Arthur felt his stomach turn. But that wasn't true. Of course not. But they made it look real. They were going to release these documents after her death, destroy her name, make sure no one would ever trust her vision for the company. She paused. Unless what? Unless I signed papers saying she had given me the money. That I had manipulated her, taken advantage of her charitable nature. They wanted to make me the villain, protect the company's reputation by blaming everything on a homeless woman who had taken advantage of a kind-hearted CEO. Arthur stood up abruptly, pacing the room. That's why they offered you money to disappear. Yes, when I refused, they threatened me, said they would make sure I never saw Maria again. She was in the hospital then, the cancer getting worse. They said they would cut off the medical care your mother had been paying for. But they didn't, Arthur said. Maria still got treatment. Because your mother found out what they were doing. Even sick, she was still powerful. She threatened to expose them all, tell everything to the press. So they backed off, made a deal. They would leave me and Maria alone, continue paying for her treatment if your mother agreed to never reveal their threats or move forward with the foundation. Arthur felt sick. These men had blackmailed his dying mother, threatened a sick child. Why didn't you tell me this yesterday before the board meeting? Because you needed to win that vote based on the foundation's merits, not out of anger over old wrongs. She smiled sadly. That's what your mother would have wanted. Before Arthur could respond, his phone rang. It was Jenny. Sir, his assistant, sounded worried. Richardson's lawyer is here with some documents. He says it's urgent. Arthur looked at Donna Rosa. I'll be right there. He turned back to her. Will you come with me? Of course, but Arthur... She touched the necklace again. Be careful, Richardson doesn't give up easily. At the office, Richardson's lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Edwards, was waiting with a thick folder. Mr. Almeida, he said smoothly, my client has some concerns about yesterday's vote. I'm sure he does, Arthur replied coldly. What's this about? Edwards opened the folder. We have evidence that your mother was not mentally competent when she developed these foundation plans. Her illness affected her judgment. Additionally, we have documents showing irregular movement of company funds during that period. The money she was setting aside for the foundation, Arthur said. We covered this yesterday. No, Edwards smiled unpleasantly. Different funds. Money that went to paying medical bills for one Maria Martinez. Money that went to various other charity cases. All without board approval. Arthur felt his anger rising. My mother was helping people. There was nothing illegal about it. Perhaps not, but it shows a pattern of irregular behavior, of decisions made while she was unwell. Decisions that could invalidate any plans she made during that period, including these foundation documents. You're trying to use my mother's kindness against her, Arthur said quietly. Just like you did when she was dying. Edward's smile faltered. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. Arthur reached into his briefcase and pulled out a file of his own. My mother kept records, Mr. Edwards. Records of every threat, every blackmail attempt. She hid them well, but they still exist. Now it was Edwards who looked uncomfortable. Those documents were destroyed. These are copies, Arthur bluffed, praying his face didn't give away the lie. Would you like to see what the press would make of them? How they would react to learning that board members threatened a dying woman and a sick child? You're bluffing, Edwards said, but he didn't sound certain. Maybe, but are you willing to risk it, is Richardson? Arthur stood up. Tell your client that if he fights the foundation, if he tries to challenge yesterday's vote, everything comes out. Everything. Edwards gathered his papers quickly, his facade of confidence cracking. This isn't over, Mr. Almeida. Yes, it is. Arthur's voice was steel. Unless you want the world to know exactly what kind of men you and Richardson really are. After Edwards left, Arthur collapsed in his chair. Donna Rosa, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, touched his shoulder. You did well, she said softly. But he's right. It's not over. I know, Arthur sighed. But I learned from the best. My mother protected her dream even when she was dying. I can protect it now. There's something else you should know, Donna Rosa said hesitantly. Something about Maria's last days at the hospital. Arthur looked up at her. What about them? Your mother came to visit her the night before she died. Maria was scared, in pain. Your mother took off her necklace, let Maria hold it. She told her it was magic, that it would help her find her way to heaven. Donna Rosa's voice broke. Maria was holding it when she died. That's why your mother wanted it buried with her, because it had helped my Maria find peace. Arthur felt tears in his eyes. And that's why you had to take it back, because it was Maria's too. Your mother understood something I didn't back then, Donna Rosa continued. She knew the necklace wasn't just jewelry. It was a symbol of connection, of love continuing even after death. She wanted me to have it back because she knew I would need that connection. Arthur stood up and hugged her, this woman who had become a second mother to him in just a few days. "We'll fight them," he promised. "We'll protect the foundation, protect my mother's legacy, and we'll find you the best doctors, get you the best treatment." "Arthur," she said gently, "some battles can't be won. My cancer, it's very advanced. But that's okay. I did what I needed to do. I got the necklace back to you, helped bring your mother's dream back to life." "No," Arthur said fiercely. "You don't get to give up. The necklace isn't done with you yet." Outside his office window, dark clouds were gathering, promising rain. But Arthur didn't care about the weather, about Richardson's threats, about anything, except saving this woman who had carried his mother's dream for 15 years. The necklace caught the light as Donna Rosa moved, its branches seeming to glow. And somewhere in those intertwining golden strands, Arthur felt sure there was still hope. For Donna Rosa, for the foundation, for everything his mother had dreamed of. The waiting room at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center was quiet except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights. Arthur sat with his head in his hands while Donna Rosa underwent tests. The necklace lay in his pocket. They'd had to remove it for the scans. "Mr. Almeida," a nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Martinez is asking for you." He found Donna Rosa sitting up in an examination room, looking small in her hospital gown. Dr. Sarah Chen, the same Sarah Chen from his board of directors, stood beside her bed, looking at some scans. "I didn't know you were taking her case personally," Arthur said to Sarah. "Your mother saved my sister's life," Sarah replied quietly. "This is the least I can do." Arthur remembered suddenly. Sarah had mentioned during the board meeting that her connection to Almeida Enterprises went deeper than business. Now he understood. "How bad is it?" he asked. Sarah's face was professional but gentle. "The cancer has spread significantly. Without aggressive treatment..." She hesitated. "Tell me straight," Donna Rosa said, firmly, "like you would tell Helena." 3 months, maybe 4. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "I'm so sorry." Arthur felt like the floor was tilting beneath his feet. "But there must be something we can do. Clinical trials, experimental treatments." "Actually," Sarah said slowly, "there is one possibility. There's a new treatment being developed in Switzerland. It's showing promising results with this type of cancer, but it's still experimental, very expensive, and would require traveling to Zurich immediately." "Money's not an issue," Arthur said quickly. "How soon can we arrange it?" "Arthur, no," Donna Rosa interrupted. "The foundation needs that money. The foundation has plenty. This is different. Your mother wouldn't want you spending millions on..." Maybe," she argued. "Not when that money could help so many others." "My mother would want you to live," Arthur shot back. "Your family, remember?" A knock at the door interrupted them. Jenny poked her head in. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Almeida, but there's an urgent situation at the office. Richardson called an emergency shareholder meeting for tomorrow morning." Arthur swore under his breath. "He's not giving up." "Go," Donna Rosa said softly. "The company needs you. I'm not leaving you." "Arthur," she touched his hand, "I've made my peace, but your mother's dream, the foundation, that needs to survive. Go fight for it." Sarah spoke up. "She's stable. We need to run more tests anyway. Go handle Richardson, then come back. We can discuss the Switzerland option later." Reluctantly, Arthur handed the necklace back to Donna Rosa. "I'll be back as soon as I can." Back at Almeida Enterprises, the atmosphere was tense. Richardson had somehow convinced several major shareholders to call for a vote of no confidence in Arthur's leadership. "They're saying you're making emotional decisions," Jenny explained as they rushed to the conference room. "That the foundation is just the beginning of you giving away company assets." "Giving away?" Arthur was furious. "We're helping people build better lives, which creates more customers, more opportunities." He stopped short. Standing in the conference room was Thomas Martinez, the lawyer Donna Rosa had introduced him to, along with several other people he recognized from his mother's hope chain. "What are you all doing here?" Thomas smiled. "Did you think your mother only helped poor people? Some of us did quite well for ourselves, well enough to buy shares in Almeida Enterprises over the years." woman stepped forward. Arthur recognized her as the restaurant owner they'd visited. "We may not own huge blocks of shares like Richardson's friends, but together we own about 18%, Thomas finished, and we vote as a block." Arthur felt tears in his eyes. "You've been here all along? Watching over the company?" "Your mother asked us to," another man said. "The veteran who now owned a successful construction company. She said someday her real legacy would need protecting. We've been waiting." The shareholder meeting was intense. Richardson had brought all his allies, armed with charts showing potential profit losses from the foundation, but he hadn't counted on the Hope Chain shareholders. One by one, they stood up to tell their stories. How Helena Almeida had helped them, how they had built successful lives, how they had helped others do the same. "My company employs 50 people, the veteran said, "people others wouldn't hire, ex-cons, recovering addicts, homeless vets. They're now tax-paying, productive citizens. That's not giving away money, that's investing in human potential. My restaurants serve 3,000 meals a day," the restaurant owner added, "because one woman believed in me when I was digging through dumpsters. That's not charity, it's good business." The vote wasn't even close. Richardson stormed out, but Arthur barely noticed. His phone was ringing. It was Sarah Chen. "Arthur," her voice was urgent, "you need to come back to the hospital, now." He found Donna Rosa back in her room, looking weaker than when he'd left. The necklace gleamed against her hospital gown. "What happened?" "Her numbers crashed," Sarah explained. "The cancer is more aggressive than we thought. If we're going to try the Switzerland treatment, it has to be now. I've made some calls. They can take her tomorrow if we can get her there." Arthur sat beside Donna Rosa. "Then we'll go tomorrow." "No," Donna Rosa said weakly. "I told you I've made my peace, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. The necklace, and it needs to keep doing its work. Keep connecting people, keep the hope chain growing." She touched it gently. "Your mother understood that objects can carry power, not magic, but the power of memory, of promise, of love." "Don't talk like this is goodbye," Arthur pleaded. "Listen to me," she insisted. "I want you to use the necklace like your mother did. When you find someone who needs hope, who needs to know they're not alone, let them hold it. Let them feel the connection to everyone who's held it before, to Helena, to Maria, to me. You're going to hold it for a long time yet," Arthur said, but his voice broke. "Arthur," Sarah interrupted gently, "there's a medical transport plane waiting at Teterboro Airport. It can have her in Zurich by morning, but we have to decide now." Arthur looked at Donna Rosa, this woman who had carried his mother's dream for 15 years, who had brought him back to his mother's true legacy. The necklace sparkled in the hospital lights, its branches intertwining like all the lives it had touched. "What would my mother do?" he whispered. Donna Rosa smiled weakly. "She would say that hope is worth fighting for. Always." Arthur stood up. "Call the airport," he told Sarah. "We're going to Switzerland." Outside the hospital window, the sun was setting over New York City. Somewhere out there, the hope chain his mother had started was still growing, still changing lives. And in this room, with this necklace that had traveled from a grave to the streets and back to him, another kind of hope was about to take flight. "Jenny," he called his assistant, "cancel everything for the next week, and call Thomas. Tell him he's in charge of the foundation launch. He'll understand." As the hospital staff prepared Donna Rosa for transport, Arthur held her hand. The necklace caught the last rays of sunlight, sending golden reflections dancing across the walls. "Your mother would be so proud of you," Donna Rosa whispered. "She'd be proud of both of us," Arthur replied. "Now let's go fight one more battle. Together." The private medical transport plane touched down in Zurich just as the sun was rising over the Swiss Alps. Arthur hadn't slept during the flight, too worried about Donna Rosa's declining condition. She had dozed fitfully, the necklace rising and falling with each breath. Dr. Weber, a tall man with kind eyes and silver hair, met them at the airport. "Mrs. Martinez," he said in slightly accented English, "we've been reviewing your case. There's no time to waste." The University Hospital Zurich was a maze of modern buildings and clean, bright corridors. Within hours of their arrival, Donna Rosa was undergoing tests and preparations for the experimental treatment. The procedure is called targeted immunotherapy, Dr. Weber explained to Arthur in his office. We've had promising results, but I must be honest, at this stage of the disease, nothing is certain. Arthur nodded, turning his mother's necklace over in his hands. Donna Rosa had insisted he keep it while she went through the preliminary tests. Just tell me there's hope. There's always hope, Dr. Weber said, reminding Arthur so much of his mother that it hurt. But she'll need all her strength for this fight. Back in New York, the foundation launch was moving forward. Thomas called with updates every few hours, corporations wanting to partner, other CEOs interested in starting similar programs, media, coverage that was overwhelmingly positive. Richardson's gone quiet, Thomas reported. Word is he's selling his shares and retiring. Guess he finally realized which way the wind was blowing. But Arthur could barely focus on the foundation news. All his attention was on Donna Rosa and the battle she was fighting. The treatment was intense. Day after day, Arthur watched as she endured the procedures, the medications, the side effects. Sometimes she seemed stronger, other times weaker. Through it all, she held onto the necklace like a lifeline. Tell me about Maria, Arthur said one evening, sitting beside her hospital bed. Not about how she died, about how she lived. Donna Rosa's face lit up even through her exhaustion. She was sunshine in human form, always laughing, always seeing the good in everything. Even in the hospital, she would make up stories about the other patients, imagine their lives getting better. Like mother, like daughter, Arthur smiled. One day, Donna Rosa continued, touching the necklace, your mother brought her a dollhouse, but Maria didn't want to play with it herself. She wanted to keep it in the children's ward, so other sick kids could enjoy it. That's when your mother gave me this necklace the first time. She said Maria had taught her what true generosity meant. A nurse came in to check Donna Rosa's vital signs, frowning slightly at the readings. Dr. Weber was called in for consultation. The treatment isn't working as quickly as we'd hoped, he told them honestly. We need to increase the intensity, but that will make the side effects worse. Do it, Donna Rosa said firmly. I've got too much left to do. The next weeks were a blur of treatments, tests, and tense waiting. Arthur worked remotely, running the company and overseeing the foundation, launched from his laptop in the hospital. Jenny flew in with important papers that needed signing. Thomas and Sarah Chen visited when they could. One morning, Arthur arrived at the hospital to find Donna Rosa's room empty. His heart stopped until a nurse quickly directed him to the hospital garden. He found her sitting in a wheelchair, wrapped in warm blankets facing the rising sun. The necklace caught the light, sending golden sparks dancing. Dr. Weber says my numbers are improving, she said, without turning around. The treatment is finally starting to work. Arthur sat beside her, hardly daring to hope. Really? Really? She turned to him, and he could see some of her old strength returning to her face. But that's not why I'm out here. I need to tell you something. What is it? Last night, I had a dream. Maria was there, and your mother. They were in this beautiful garden, and they were both smiling. Your mother said it wasn't my time yet, that I still had work to do. The hope chain? Arthur asked softly. More than that. The necklace, it needs to keep moving, keep connecting people. Like it connected me to Helena, and Helena to Maria, and now you to both of them. She took his hand. I think I know what we need to do with the foundation. Over the next hour, as the sun rose fully over the Alps, Donna Rosa laid out her vision. The foundation wouldn't just provide help, it would provide connections. Each person helped would receive a symbol, something like the necklace to remind them they weren't alone. When they were back on their feet, they would pass it on to someone else who needed hope. We'll create thousands of hope chains, she said, her eyes shining. Each one growing, branching out, just like the design on this necklace. Arthur was already making notes on his phone. We could start with jewelry, simple pendants with the same branch design, each one numbered, so we can track the chains of connection, see how far they spread. And share the stories, Donna Rosa added. Let people see how one act of kindness can grow into hundreds. They were so excited discussing the plans that they almost missed Dr. Weber approaching with a tablet in his hands. Mrs. Martinez, he said, smiling broadly, your latest scan results are in. The tumors are shrinking. Significantly. Arthur felt tears rolling down his face. Donna Rosa clutched the necklace, her own tears falling. It's not a complete remission, Dr. Weber cautioned, but if this continues... I'll take it, Donna Rosa said firmly. I've got necklaces to distribute. That night, Arthur called an emergency video conference with the foundation board. He and Donna Rosa presented their idea for the hope chain symbols. Thomas was the first to speak. Helena would have loved this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It's perfect. Sarah Chen was already running numbers. We can have the first batch of pendants ready within a month. I know some jewelry manufacturers who would love to be part of this. The restaurant owner spoke up next. My customers already ask about my story all the time. Having a physical symbol to pass on, to keep the chain growing as it's brilliant. Back in her hospital room later, Donna Rosa was sleeping peacefully. The necklace gleamed on her bedside table. Arthur picked it up gently, studying the intricate branch design that would soon be replicated thousands of times. You knew, didn't you, Mom? He whispered. You knew the necklace would bring us all together somehow. That it would help your dream grow even after you were gone. Outside the window, the lights of Zurich twinkled like stars. Somewhere in that city, artisans would soon begin crafting new necklaces, new symbols of hope and connection. And somewhere, Arthur was sure his mother and Maria were smiling. The necklace felt warm in his hands, alive with all the stories it carried, all the lives it had touched. And now, finally, it was ready to inspire thousands more stories, thousands more connections, thousands more miracles. Just like the one they were witnessing in this hospital room in Zurich, where hope had once again proven stronger than despair. And love had once again found a way to grow new branches. 3 months after their arrival in Zurich, Arthur and Donna Rosa were finally heading home. The hospital staff gathered to say goodbye, many of them wiping away tears. During her stay, Donna Rosa had touched their lives just as she touched everyone's, listening to their stories, offering wisdom, sharing hope. Remember, Dr. Weber said, reviewing her discharge papers one last time, you'll need to come back for checkups every 3 months. The cancer isn't gone, but it's under control. As long as you stay on the maintenance therapy, I'll make sure she does, Arthur promised. On the flight back to New York, Donna Rosa was stronger than she'd been in months. The necklace caught, the sunlight streaming through the plane window as she looked through photos on Arthur's tablet. The foundation has been busy while we were away, she said, smiling at images of the first Hope Chain ceremony. Arthur nodded proudly. Thomas and the others had done an amazing job. The Helena Almeida Foundation had already helped 50 families get back on their feet, each receiving one of the specially designed pendant necklaces. The stories were being shared on social media, inspiring others to start similar programs. Look at this one, Arthur said, showing her a video on his phone. In the clip, a young woman was speaking at a foundation event, holding her pendant. 6 months ago, I was living in my car with my 2 kids, she said. Today, I have a job, an apartment, and hope for the future. And when I'm stronger, I'll pass this pendant on to someone else who needs it, just like someone passed hope to me. Donna Rosa wiped away tears. Your mother would be so proud, not just of the foundation, but of you. Of us, Arthur corrected. For us, none of this would have happened without you. The pilot announced their descent into New York. Out the window, the city skyline came into view, golden in the late afternoon sun. Home, Donna Rosa whispered. But when they landed, instead of heading to Arthur's apartment, the car took them to a different part of the city. Where are we going? Donna Rosa asked. I have a surprise, Arthur said mysteriously. They pulled up in front of a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn. Flowers bloomed in window boxes, and warm light shone from inside. What is this? Your new home, Arthur said. If you want it. He led her up the steps. Inside, the house was fully furnished, warm and welcoming. Photos hung on the walls. Helena with young Arthur, Donna Rosa with Maria, and newer ones from their time in Zurich. The 3rd floor is set up as an office, Arthur explained. The foundation's Hope Chain coordinator needs a proper workspace after all. Donna Rosa turned to him in shock. Hope Chain coordinator? Who better? You've been doing it unofficially for 20 years already. He handed her a business card with her name on it. The board voted unanimously. Before she could respond, voices called from the kitchen. Thomas was there along with Sarah Chen, Father Michael, Carmen from the shelter, and dozens of others. All the people whose lives had been touched by Helena Almeida's kindness, all now part of the foundation's work. "Welcome home," they chorused. Carmen brought out a cake. Sarah Chen presented a folder full of letters from people who had already been helped by the foundation. Thomas had a stack of legal papers. The house was being put in Donna Rosa's name. "I can't accept all this," she protested weakly. "Yes, you can," Arthur said firmly. "Mom would insist." Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Donna Rosa and Arthur sat in her new living room. A photo album lay open on her lap, pictures of Maria that she'd kept safe all these years. "I want to show you something," Arthur said. He pulled out his phone and played a video. It was security camera footage from St. Patrick's Cathedral, dated 20 years ago. The quality was grainy, but they could clearly see Helena Almeida sitting with a much younger Donna Rosa, who was heavily pregnant. "Where did you find this?" Donna Rosa gasped. The church kept all their security tapes. It took some time to find the right one. Arthur paused the video on a frame where his mother was smiling, talking animatedly. "I never got to see her like this. So relaxed, so happy, just helping people." "She was different there," Donna Rosa agreed. "Away from the business world, she could just be herself." "I've been thinking," Arthur said slowly. "The foundation is doing great work, but it's still very organized, professional. Maybe we need something more personal too." "What do you mean?" "The brownstone next door is for sale. What if we turned it into a drop-in center? No appointments needed, no formal programs, just a place where people could come and talk, like Mom did with you at the church. We could call it Helena's place." Donna Rosa touched the necklace, tears in her eyes. "A place where anyone could find hope." "Exactly. The foundation can handle the big stuff, job training, housing assistance, medical care. But sometimes people just need someone to listen, to remind them they're not alone. Like your mother did for me," Donna Rosa said softly, "like I tried to do for others." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights through the window. The necklace caught the light, its branches seeming to glow with an inner warmth. "I've been thinking too," Donna Rosa said finally, "about Maria and your mother and all the people we've helped, about how the necklace keeps connecting us all. What about it? Maybe it's time to share their stories, really share them. Not just the success stories we use for the foundation, but the hard parts too. The pain, the struggles, the moments of doubt, and the small miracles that kept us going." Arthur nodded slowly. "A book?" "A book," Donna Rosa confirmed. "Starting with Helena's secret life helping others, through Maria's story, through how the necklace brought us together, and now the foundation. Show people that hope isn't just about happy endings. It's about finding light in the darkness, about keeping faith even when it seems impossible." "The Hope Chain Chronicles," Arthur suggested. "Yes, and we'll make sure every shelter, every hospital waiting room, every place where people might need hope has a copy." Outside, a soft rain began to fall. But inside the brownstone, warmth and hope filled every corner. The necklace gleamed in the lamplight, its branches a testament to all the connections it had helped create. "Mom knew," Arthur said quietly. "She knew that someday we'd need to tell these stories. That's why she made sure you kept the necklace, safe all those years." "She knew a lot of things," Donna Rosa agreed. "She knew that hope is contagious, that kindness multiplies, that love never really dies, it just grows new branches." They sat together in the warm light, surrounded by photos of the past and plans for the future. Outside, New York City hummed with life, with countless stories of struggle and hope waiting to be touched by the legacy of Helena Almeida and her magical necklace. And somewhere, in the space between memory and hope, between loss and new beginnings, Helena and Maria smiled down on their loved ones, knowing that their story would continue to grow, continue to inspire, continue to remind people that they were never truly alone. 6 months after their return from Zurich, Helena's place was thriving. The brownstone next door to Donna Rosa's home had been transformed into a warm, welcoming space where people could find hope and help without paperwork or appointments. Just like Helena Almeida had done years ago, Donna Rosa sat and listened to their stories, offering comfort and connection. Arthur visited every Sunday, just as his mother used to visit Donna Rosa at St. Patrick's. He was there one rainy Sunday afternoon when an unexpected visitor arrived. "Mr. Richardson would like to speak with you," Jenny called. She still worked as Arthur's assistant, but now spent much of her time helping with the foundation. Arthur tensed. He hadn't seen Richardson since the former board member had sold his shares and disappeared 6 months ago. "Send him in." The old man who walked into Helena's place looked nothing like the powerful businessman who had once threatened everything they were building. His shoulders were stooped, his face lined with something that looked like regret. "Hello, Arthur," Richardson said quietly. "Mrs. Martinez." He nodded to Donna Rosa, who was sitting in her usual chair by the window, the necklace gleaming against her sweater. "What do you want, George?" Arthur asked, trying to keep the anger from his voice. "To make amends, if I can." Richardson sat heavily in a chair. "I'm dying, Arthur. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors give me 2 months at most." Donna Rosa leaned forward, compassion replacing the wariness in her eyes. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be," Richardson said. "It's made me think about a lot of things. About the kind of man I've been. About what really matters in the end." He pulled an envelope from his coat. "I need to tell you both something about Helena." Arthur felt his heart skip. "What about her?" "She came to see me the day before she died. She knew what we had done, the threats, the blackmail, all of it. But instead of exposing us, she made me promise something." His hands shook as he opened the envelope. "She made me promise that when the time was right, when her real legacy was finally revealed, I would give you this." He handed Arthur a letter. The paper yellowed with age. Arthur recognized his mother's handwriting immediately. "My dearest Arthur," he read aloud, his voice trembling. "If you're reading this, then everything I hoped for has come to pass. You've found your way back to what really matters. You've met Rosa, learned about Maria, discovered the true power of connection and hope." Donna Rosa wiped tears from her eyes as Arthur continued reading. "George Richardson and his friends think they've won. They think they've buried my dream along with me, but they don't understand that some dreams can't be buried. Some loves can't be forgotten. Some chains of hope can't be broken." Arthur had to pause, his vision blurring. Richardson sat with his head bowed. "The necklace you helped me choose all those years ago was never just jewelry. It was a symbol of the connection between people, of the way love and kindness can branch out and grow. I knew that someday when you were ready, it would find its way back to you. And with it would come the truth about what really matters in this life." Donna Rosa touched the necklace, her fingers tracing the familiar pattern. "I'm leaving you the company, son, but that's not your real inheritance. Your real inheritance is the understanding that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in lives touched, in hope shared, in love multiplied. Rosa will help you understand this. She and Maria taught me more about love and courage than any business deal ever did." Arthur looked at Donna Rosa, seeing in her face all the wisdom and love his mother had seen. "And to those who try to stop this dream," the letter continued, "I leave forgiveness." They tried to protect what they thought was valuable, not understanding that the most valuable things can't be locked in a vault or listed on a stock exchange. Richardson made a sound that might have been a sob. "So now, my dear boy, you have a choice. You can run the company the way they want, focused only on profits and power, or you can run it the way it was meant to be run, as a force for good in the world, a way to help people help each other. The necklace will help you remember which choice matters more." "She knew," Arthur whispered. "She knew everything that would happen." "There's more," Richardson said hoarsely. He pulled another envelope from his coat. "This is from me. It's a confession detailing everything we did. And this," he added a thick folder, "is proof that your mother had already legally established the foundation before she died. We hid the paperwork, but it was all legal, all valid. The foundation isn't just your initiative, it's her last official act as CEO." Arthur stared at the documents that proved his mother's dream had been real, had been legitimate all along. "Why now?" he asked Richardson. "Because I'm dying," the old man said simply. "And I don't Want to die knowing I helped bury a dream like this? Helena was right. I protected what I thought was valuable and missed what really mattered. Donna Rosa stood up and walked to Richardson, the necklace catching the late afternoon light. Would you like to tell us your story? That's what we do here. We listen, we share, we connect. Richardson looked up at her in surprise, then at the necklace. Why would you want to hear my story after what I did? Because that's what Helena would do, Donna Rosa said gently. Because every story matters, even the ones that seem too dark to tell. For the next hour, George Richardson told his story. About growing up poor, fighting his way into the business world, becoming obsessed with wealth and power. About seeing Helena's charitable work as a threat to everything he'd built. About realizing too late that he'd fought against the very thing that might have healed his own wounded heart. As he talked, other people drifted into the room, regulars at Helena's place who came every Sunday to share their own stories. They listened without judgment, just as Helena had listened to Donna Rosa all those years ago. When Richardson finally fell silent, Donna Rosa did something unexpected. She took off the necklace. "Hold this for a moment," she said, placing it in his hands. I couldn't," he stammered. "Yes, you can. Feel the weight of it. Think about all the people who have held it. Helena, Maria, me, Arthur, all the hope it's carried, all the love it represents." Richardson cradled the necklace, tears rolling down his face. "You're part of the story now too," Donna Rosa said softly. "Part of the hope chain. And that means you're never alone." Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, filling Helena's place with warm golden light. The necklace in Richardson's hands seemed to glow, its branches casting tiny shadows on the wall. Arthur watched as the man who had once tried to destroy his mother's dream wept openly, holding the very symbol of that dream. And he understood, finally and completely, what his mother had known all along. That hope and love could transform even the hardest heart, that it was never too late to become part of something bigger than yourself. The necklace had done it again. It had forged another unexpected connection, had helped heal another wounded soul. And somewhere Arthur was sure his mother was smiling. 1 year to the day after Arthur first saw Donna Rosa on that street corner, Helena's place was hosting a special celebration. The main room was filled with people whose lives had been touched by the hope chain, hundreds of them, each wearing their own branch-patterned pendant. "Look at them all," Donna Rosa said softly, touching the original necklace. Her health was stable now, the treatments from Zurich continuing to keep the cancer at bay. Each pendant with its own story. Arthur nodded, watching the crowd. Thomas was there with some of his pro bono clients. Sarah Chen had brought former patients who had received help from the foundation. Father Michael and Carmen from the shelter were surrounded by people they'd helped over the years. "Time for the ceremony," Jenny reminded them gently. Arthur stepped up to the podium they'd set up in the corner. The room fell silent. "A year ago," he began, "I was a different person. I thought I knew what success meant. I thought I understood my mother's legacy. Then I saw a necklace that should have been buried, around the neck of a woman who would change everything." He gestured to Donna Rosa, who joined him at the podium. "Today, we're not just celebrating the hundreds of lives that have been changed through the Helena Almeida Foundation. We're not just celebrating the thousands of new connections made through the hope chain. We're celebrating something my mother understood long ago, that hope and love are the most powerful forces in the universe, and they grow stronger the more we share them." Donna Rosa stepped forward. "Today we're going to share something special with you all. The book we've been working on, The Hope Chain Chronicles, will be in every shelter, hospital and library in the city by next week. But more than that, we're going to share the story of this necklace." She touched the original necklace, the one that had started everything. "This necklace has traveled from a young boy helping his mother choose it, to a dying woman passing it to her son, to a grieving mother losing her daughter, to a homeless woman keeping hope alive, and back to that boy now grown, helping it continue its journey." Arthur took over. "But its journey isn't over. Starting today, this necklace will travel again. Each month it will be passed to someone new, someone who needs its magic, its history, its connection to all the love and hope it carries. They'll keep it for a month, then pass it on to someone else they think needs it. A murmur went through the crowd. "We'll track its journey," Donna Rosa continued. "Add each story to the chronicles. Let people see how hope grows, how love multiplies, how we're all connected in ways we never imagined." Just then the door opened. A nurse helped George Richardson into the room. He was in a wheelchair now, much weaker than he'd been a month ago, but his eyes were bright. "I have something to add to the chronicles," he said, his voice weak, but clear. "My last chapter, you might say." Arthur helped him to the front of the room. Richardson pulled out a piece of paper. "I've changed my will," he announced. "Everything I have, my money, my properties, my investments, all of it goes to the Helena Almeida Foundation. It's time for my life's work to become part of a better legacy." Tears flowed freely around the room. Donna Rosa hugged the dying man gently. "And now," Arthur said, composing himself, "it's time for the necklace to begin its new journey." Donna Rosa unclasped the necklace, holding it up so it caught the light. The room fell silent. "Its first stop," she said, "is with someone who reminds me so much of my Maria. Someone who, despite fighting her own battles, spends every day helping others fight theirs." She walked to a young woman in hospital scrubs, one of Sarah Chen's oncology nurses, who was battling breast cancer herself while continuing to care for other cancer patients. "Lisa," Donna Rosa said, placing the necklace around the nurse's neck, "for the next month, you're the guardian of hope. Let it remind you that you're never alone. Then when the time feels right, pass it on to someone else who needs to know that too." Lisa touched the necklace, tears streaming down her face. "I already know who needs it next," she whispered. "A patient of mine, a young mother. She just found out her cancer is spreading." And so it began again, the chain of hope, growing. New branches touching new lives. Later that evening, after most of the guests had gone, Arthur and Donna Rosa sat in their usual spots by the window. The room still hummed with the energy of the day's events. "I had a dream last night," Donna Rosa said softly. "Maria and your mother were there again, but this time they weren't in a garden. They were here, in this room, watching all these people sharing their stories, wearing their pendants. They were smiling. It wasn't just a dream," Arthur said. "They are here, in every story shared, every life changed, every new branch of hope that grows." He looked around the room that had become a sanctuary for so many. Photos covered the walls. Helena, Maria, and now hundreds of others. Each pendant out there carried a piece of their story, their love, their hope. "Mom knew," he said quietly. "She knew that love was like those branches on the necklace, always growing, always reaching out, always finding new ways to connect people. And now everyone else knows too." Donna Rosa smiled. "Look." Through the window, they could see people leaving, their pendants catching the setting sun. Each one carried a story. Each one was part of the chain. Each one was proof that hope never dies. It just grows new branches. Outside, New York City was painted in shades of gold by the setting sun. Inside Helena's place, the legacy of a mother's love, a child's joy, and a homeless woman's faith had grown into something magical, something eternal. The necklace would continue its journey, gathering more stories, connecting more hearts, sharing more hope. And in every life it touched, the spirit of Helena Almeida would live on, reminding people that they were never truly alone, that hope was never truly lost, that love was never truly gone. It had taken a necklace that should have been buried, a chance encounter on a street corner, and a year of miracles to reveal this truth. But now that truth would keep growing, keep reaching out, keep touching lives, one pendant, one story, one heart at a time. The sun set on Helena's place, but hope was rising, always growing new branches, always finding its way home to hearts that needed it most. And somewhere, Helena and Maria smiled, knowing their love would keep growing, keep connecting, keep hoping. Forever. The end.